Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. This is an unbelievable victory for President Trump against news organizations that serve essentially as public relations tools for the Democratic Party. This is amazing for a number of reasons. Number one, you're going to hear that Trump has experienced over 92 to 100% negative media coverage, which essentially has served as campaign donations. When media goes after Trump from 2015 to today, these are campaign donations. They're supposed to be objective. They're not supposed to pick a side. They're not supposed to give free advertising, which is what takes place. We'll get to that in a second. Hit subscribe to this channel. Check this out, and you'll see what I'm saying. Huge. It was basically a $500 million victory. But it's actually more than that. It's billions upon billions of dollars in victory over organizations. Could be NPR, in this case, PBS, Radio Free Europe, all of these organizations funded by taxpayer dollars. But also this serves as a precedent against CNN, MSNBC, and others. Check this out.
Trump's second term, 92% negative coverage. We mentioned that, but compare this to Biden. 59% positive. Again, very little mention of those pardons. Trump first term, 89% negative. Quite something.
But remember how distrusted those legacy media are now, and why that 92% may sway a poll a little bit here and there. What matters is how the people voted. So they clearly know that they can't trust the media that lied to them and was complicit in a cover-up by the people around Biden about where he was. He was not sentient enough to be president of the United States. We learned that when? Well, the rest of the world learned it. We knew it at Fox already from Axios at the White House Correspondent Dinner just past weekend. I would say this, be careful what you wish for when you wish for people's downfall. And that's what Democrats are doing. They're really hoping that the president will fail. And the American public is astute enough to know that that means that they want all of us to fail, that they don't care anything about us as citizens. Why would you vote for somebody who's rooting for the president who just came in on a mandate and came in on some big numbers, popularity, all of the battleground states? Why would you say that you want to go against that man when the voters put him there? Because you don't like the voters? Be careful what you wish for.
Be careful indeed. You know, we think about the 100 days, and then I think about looking forward. And I think about something really important I heard from Scott Bessent today. And should this happen, I want you to listen carefully to what he said he thinks could happen throughout this year. If this happens, these tax cuts you're about to hear, I believe this will cement President Trump and the Republican Party and the movement for quite some time among voters. Listen to this.
So you'll hear that in a second, but check this out, ladies and gentlemen. If you have 98%, 92% negative media coverage, okay, this is very, very important. Journalists cannot have strict ethical well, you're talking about today's journalists in the United States of America. They're essentially activists, but they cannot, the journalists or media outlets cannot directly donate to political campaigns or parties. They can't use the employer's name or logo. They can't donate to a cause related to the issues they cover. They can donate only to nonpartisan causes. Okay, what are nonpartisan causes? Okay, they are giving free campaign, everybody from Jimmy Kimmel to Jimmy Fallon. No, not Jimmy Fallon. Sorry, Jimmy Fallon doesn't actually. Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, Stephen Colbert. Jimmy Kimmel. When you look at these shows, these are campaign donations, essentially every single night, 24/7. Campaign donations. Okay, check this out.
Well, it's funny that the Democrats are getting so upset about this. We're not censoring anybody. NPR and PBS have their First Amendment right to say whatever they want. What they don't have a right to is American taxpayer dollars. Right. State-funded media, state-sponsored media in this country take north of $500 million every single year. And what do they use it for? They use it to spew left-wing propaganda, to push values that are antithetical to American history, American experience, and to the values of conservative people like the people of Texas 26. That's what we're going after. We're simply saying that these institutions which are pushing leftism in our country cannot be taking taxpayer dollars.
Congressman, before we go, all of the Democrats, members of the liberal sewage lagoon, as I like to call them, they represent themselves.
And that's the problem. They represent their own interests through biased media. Okay? You can't have 92% negative media coverage of Trump and 60 to 100% positive media coverage of Democrats at all times. And that's what the numbers point to. These are campaign donations. President Trump should look at FEC violations, potentially criminal violations. This is serious. Okay. The Supreme Court, if I go to the Supreme Court might rule that, Democrat or media companies can pick a side and that it's not an actual campaign donation. But what's taking place is that if the Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, The Atlantic, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, Jon Stewart, all the major newspapers throughout the country, Times, Post, Washington Post, I explained, okay, so if they're always pumping Trump-Russia myth, Trump fomented a rebellion, Trump didn't pay his taxes, all of these things that weren't true, categorically weren't true, that's why he won the popular vote. Okay, the cognitive dissonance for people who don't understand, the never Trumpers, the few but still sadly vocal never Trumpers that are completely irrelevant within the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It stands for nothing, has no leader, has no leaders, not even, forget one leader, that has no leaders. They're just, like you heard, wishing for the downfall of the country because they don't like Trump. These are the people who consistently foment hoaxes, things that are not true. Trump was never a Kremlin operative. Trump never said both sides. He never tried to foment a rebellion. He wasn't an insurrectionist. All of these things, these are absurd leaps of logic. This is why media is at an all-time low in terms of trust. But these are essentially campaign donations. President Trump must look into that. If he's winning these verdicts, there is precedent. Not only did he get the defamation lawsuit win against ABC News and George Stephanopoulos, but he should look into FEC violations. These are campaign donations, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, you probably heard that first. Nobody's talking about this in the known universe. Okay, but when you are giving 92% negative media coverage and producers and directors and writers and editors throughout all of these allegedly objective news organizations, when they are specifically looking for hit pieces against conservatives, to silence conservatives, to write negative stories on Trump and anyone around Trump, to foment, to actually work with corrupt intel and government officials for years to flood stories. There are liberal journalists we won't discuss who actually worked with government officials to spread the Steele dossier. Okay? That is a campaign. That's essentially a campaign donation. That's why the Steele dossier led to an FEC fine. This is amazing that President Trump won this verdict that's essentially billions of dollars, but it's a $500 million in terms of what these what these NPR and PBS and others get. But you're looking, ladies and gentlemen, at serious laws concerning how media can donate to political parties. Simply saying, well, this is just objective media, this is the free press, that's not going to fly anymore. You have the emails, the DNC emails, and years back showed that these journalists are actually showing up at events, at social events with members of the Democratic Party's campaign. They're intertwined in such an overt manner. You cannot, if you're a media organization, you get the New York Times, and we don't give to our journalists, we're completely objective. The entire editorial board, every journalist, no one is walking into the New York Times or Washington Post with a Make America Great Again hat. They would be fired immediately. So these are campaign donations from individual journalists, from editors, from producers, from everybody from Maddow to all the CNN. These are essentially, not, right now they're not viewed. Maddow is not viewed, and the New York Times is not viewed as giving campaign donations. Right now, they're not viewed as that. Okay? But President Trump should look into the fact that American media has been an extension, a public relations wing of the Democratic Party, giving billions upon billions in campaign donations with deliberately skewed coverage. If he wins the popular vote and there's 92% negative media coverage, what does that tell you? Hit subscribe to this channel right now.